Yesterday, a copycat arrived at UnitedHealth headquarters with a gun. He had threatened to shoot the place up. The FBI intervened, stopped the man. He was apprehended. Now, according to reports, the man had no specific grievance with UnitedHealth, which indicates there's only one reason why a deranged individual would show up and make such threats, threatening the lives of innocent people working at a health insurer. The Luigi Mangione effect. It's not the first time we've seen a copycat. Several months ago, a woman claimed that she was going to commit serious acts of harm against individuals at her insurance provider, for which she was labeled in the media as a Mangione copycat as well. You guys know what I'm going to say. We are seeing violence, threats, crime, and it seems pretty crazy in cities at the very least, or at least in public. Now, the scary thing is, in media, they cheer this on. The governor of PA's house was just firebombed the other day by a guy who reportedly was a socialist. The escalation of threats of violence, the calls for violence on the left have reached critical mass to the point where, I will say it again, a deranged man with a gun showed up to UnitedHealth HQ with no grievance against this place. The fundraiser for Luigi Mangione is near $1 million. And Taylor Lorenz is being propped up by CNN and Netflix while she calls for and supports. She calls for the defense and support of Luigi Mangione as morally good in doing what he did. The escalation is pretty obvious, in my opinion. This is coming largely from one political faction. And so the question then becomes, what happens next? You guys know my thoughts on the matter for the most part. Now, I will say this. I don't want to blackpill people. Part of me really just wants to be crazy. And I wish I was. And then my family, we woke up to the news that the governor of PA's home was firebombed by a deranged leftist. And obviously my family's deeply concerned about the extent these psychopaths are willing to go. So the question I have for you before I even get into the harsher details of everything is just, has it gotten better or has it gotten worse? Honest question. I think in my mind, it's gotten worse. Don't get me wrong. The Summer of Love riots were substantially worse in terms of the overall damage. But now we're seeing targeted attacks, celebration in the mainstream media, prominent individuals being put on Netflix and CNN, as I mentioned, cheering on the violence. Which brings us to the next degree of where we go. The story of the El Salvador man. Donald Trump deported a man who was here illegally, who was not granted asylum, and only had a temporary stay on deportation. He was deported as there was a deportation order in conflict with a temporary stay. The media lies. They say he was a Maryland father. The left says it was an innocent man kidnapped and sent to a foreign death prison. They say this is Trump's authoritarian move, and they're calling for mass movements in the street over this. Judges are obstructing Trump in every direction. And we have now the judiciary at odds with the executive to a degree we've never seen before. I hate to say it, guys, because I know people don't like to hear it, but this is true. There have never been this many universal injunctions in such short amount of time. Trump has, I think, more than half? I could be wrong. But Trump has received substantially more universal injunctions from the judiciary than any other president, and in a tremendously short amount of time. This is what people are referring to as the judicial coup. Not perhaps. The left will argue it's Trump who's violating the Constitution, and the judiciary is trying to hold things together. Certainly, we'd argue the inverse. Trump is well within his constitutional authorities to deport individuals, and the judiciary is obstructing in ways we rarely see. And that's true. Universal injunctions are not part of the Constitution. They can't just do that. For those that aren't familiar, this means they're issuing rulings that do not pertain to the parties in their court, which means they're issuing national decrees of law. And then we have reports that more than once, ranking military officers refused to display the image of Trump or Hegseth, showing pure insubordination. So let me just say it again, my friends. As the left escalates calls for violence, engages in acts of terror against American civilians, We have concerns of a rising discontent in the military. Hopefully it's small and meaningless. And we have fears the judiciary is acting to fight over control of the U.S. government. I'm hoping. It's like most generations, what we're looking at is simply a period of civil strife that we come out on top of. There are reasons to believe that this is just the death throes, as they call it, of a dying liberal economic order, and that Trump will win and there will be a unified order in only a few years. Then there's the fourth turning, the Strauss-out generational theory that suggests in the next 3 or so years, things will come to a hot conflict of sorts. I don't know what to tell you guys. I want to be wrong. And I want to believe that our period of civil strife simply sputters out like many often do. Maybe that will be the case. But let's read the news from today and go over just how crazy things are getting. Smash that like button, share the show, my friends. Before we get started, we do have an amazing sponsor, Fast Growing Trees. Head over to fastgrowingtrees.com/Timcast and you got the promo code right there. You get plant 20, 60% off. Use that fastgrowingtrees.com/Timcast, though. Let them know I sent you. Do you guys know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S.? With thousands of different plants and over 2 million happy customers, they have all the plants your yard needs, like fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, and more. What a heck of a pitch following the seriousness of that intro, right? Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to get the yard of your dreams, order online, and get your plants delivered directly to your door in just a few days. Without ever leaving your home, plus, their Alive and Thrive guarantee ensures your plants arrive happy and healthy. It's so difficult and annoying to shop for plants in person. I'm super busy here personally. I don't want to take up a whole Saturday shopping for plants, and that is true. Not even knowing if the store is out of the plant that I want until I get there. We have been considering getting a bunch of fruit trees, by the way, because we can give them to the chickens and eat them ourselves. It's even more annoying to get your car all messy bringing home the new plants. Yep. You got to use a truck, ladies and gentlemen, a Cybertruck perhaps. Their research center has plenty of advice from their plant experts to help you learn more about your yard's needs. You'll know which plants and trees will thrive in your area. This spring, they have the best deals for your yard, up to half off on all select plants and other deals. Listeners to this show get 15% off their first purchase when using code TIMCAST at checkout. I will also mention when you go to fastgrowingtrees.com/Timcast, it literally offers you 20% off everything. So there you go, Fast Growing Trees. I mean, we're fans, but I think people are going to find a better discount. It's an additional 15% off. You get more? I don't know. They got 2 codes. Maybe you can use both. That's an additional 15% off. Fastgrowingtrees.com/Timcast. Now's the perfect time to plant, my friends. Seriously. I also just want to say, indeed, it is the perfect time to plant. Guys, I want you to be self-sufficient. I want you to be healthy, happy, and if you can, fruit trees are great. And so are chickens. Let's take a look at this story from CNN. A person is arrested at UnitedHealth headquarters after reports of an intruder. They keep the story rather light. The first thing I want to say is the shocking offense I take at how the media frames things and thus keeps Americans in the dark and unable to fend for themselves. Now, the Daily Mail, I think, gives us a better view of this. A Luigi Mangione copycat unmasked as his mother reveals why he turned up at UnitedHealth ready to kill. Okay. With this Ecuador story about El Salvador, the media is saying it's a Maryland man. He's literally not. He's an illegal immigrant. They lie. This is the hard thing to deal with, that there are many people who live in a false reality from media manipulations and false framings. The only thing I can do is try to give you the full details so you can make up your mind and figure out what's true, and then take care of yourself. I'm not going to live for you. I'm not going to plant your trees for you or bring chickens to you. If it truly does get bad in this country, and it's gotten bad to a great degree, though, I do think Trump is doing a lot of great stuff to help fix things. No one is going to save you. So ask yourself this, what can you do by yourself? Now, me personally, I don't have good answers for the most part. I do keep, I think, 3 or 4 different survival guides on my phone, as well as means of powering my phone should we lose the grid. That is not because I think the world is going to end. It's because sometimes the power goes out and you want to charge your phone. So we have backup batteries. And I think that's an important thing for you all to do. You might hear a wild animal. Do you know what to do? They say If it's brown, get down. If it's black, fight back. If it's white, good night. And that's a reference to bears. So these are things you might want to learn if you're out on a hike or something like that, but they could save you in the event things do get bad. Although, to be completely honest, I don't think things will ever get so bad, to be completely honest, that you're going to need to, fish, make a spear and fish in a river or anything like that, wearing raggedy leathers. But we could face recessions or depressions, and maybe you want to just be prepared because chance favors those who are. The Daily Mail reports an apparent Luigi Mangione copycat who turned up at UnitedHealthcare's Minnesota headquarters with a gun has been unmasked in his police mugshot. Pawn shop worker Ian Stanley Wagner, 26, was arrested on Monday after he arrived at the facility in Minnetonka just 4 months after Mangione, 26, allegedly gunned down the health insurance giant CEO in New York. The FBI Minneapolis field office told Daily Mail Wagner contacted them at around 10:47 a.m. and issued threats of violence directed at the UnitedHealthcare facility if specific demands were not met. Within minutes of receiving the call, the FBI initiated a coordinated response with our partners. A trained FBI crisis negotiator established contact with the individual by phone from within the FBI building, and Minnetonka police was on scene, along with 2 FBI task force officers. Wagner surrendered after about 45 minutes. The Minnetonka police took him into custody. He appeared dazed while wearing a prison-issue orange jumpsuit in his police booking photograph. The FBI added the investigation is in its early stages, but there is currently no indication that the individual had specific grievances against UnitedHealthcare. However, Wagner's mother told ABC affiliate that her son called her from outside the UnitedHealthcare HQ and told her he was going to shoot into it. Sources also said sources told the outlet that a gun was found in the front seat of his car. It appears that barriers in the parking lot stopped his vehicle from entering the facility. His mother said he is on the spectrum and had been suffering with mental health issues. According to his social media profiles, he lived in Hopkins. He was a pawnbroker. They're going to mention details on the UnitedHealthcare, but my friends, I think it's fair to say the only reason this guy did what he did is because of Luigi Mangione, because of people like Taylor Lorenz, because of Stephen Colbert, because of Jimmy Kimmel, and because of Jordan Klepper. Because these individuals have been and Bill Burr, don't get me wrong, they have been cheering on the violence. Now, to be fair, less so Jordan Klepper, who actually lightly chastised his audience on The Daily Show when they cheered for the violent attacks on Tesla facilities, which, mind you, has not stopped. It maybe is not to the most extreme degree. The feds, Pam Bondi says they have arrested someone related to one of these major arson attacks, but we are still seeing low-scale attacks on vehicles and threats against Tesla owners. This story was in December of 24. Florida woman becomes first Luigi Mangione copycat to be arrested, left in tears during hearing. They say a Florida woman, Brianna Boston, was arrested in Lakeland, Florida, after allegedly threatening her health insurer using language similar to that tied to Mangione. On Tuesday, Boston was allegedly speaking with a rep from Blue Cross Blue Shield, an American health insurance provider, after she had been told that her medical claim was denied. Boston, frustrated by the denied medical claim, reportedly ended her call with Blue Cross Blue Shield by saying, "Delay, deny, depose, you people are next." She got arrested for it. Mangione's alleged crime involved shell casings with a similar phrase like deny, depose, referencing criticism of the insurance industry. The words are rooted in the 2010 book Delay, Deny, Defend by Rutgers law professor Jay Feinman. Now, I'll tell you this. I certainly understand why people are upset with health insurance companies. The system is far from perfect. But I want to make sure people take it all in perspective. 100 years ago, this problem did not exist. And this is the paradox of success. 100 years ago, you did not have health insurance providers like we do today. You didn't have medical care like we do today, nor the technology. If you had cancer, you died. If you were diabetic, you died. You could have gotten a minor infection and died. And nobody blamed anyone for it. Perhaps demons, I guess, if you go back far enough. You go back a couple hundred years and you can be walking through the woods on a hunt and get cut on a tree branch and die from sepsis. Not typical of young individuals, but sometimes depending on the severity of the infection. With great technology, we can now treat advanced diseases. But with this comes the paradox of success. Anger at the success itself, inadvertently, because Luigi Mangione, for instance, what was his issue? He's alleged to have killed this man. The man who assassinated Brian Thompson was wearing a mask and was covered up. So it is alleged until they prove it. Most people think he did it. The left is certainly celebrating him for doing it. He had a spinal issue that required advanced surgeries, which left him in debilitating pain, so they've reported. This man would have never received that medical care 100 years ago. They probably would have bopped him on the head with a mallet, made him drink mercury. Okay, I'm kidding. Not 100 years ago, but maybe 300 years ago. He is angry at a system which facilitates, whether poorly or otherwise, medical treatment for individuals. Now, you may argue, Tim, how dare you? The system denies people who deserve the coverage. Don't get me wrong. I understand why there's reasons to be angry about it. But I stress, if we did not have it at all, there'd be much less medical care. And certainly you argue it could be better, and you are correct. It can be. But that doesn't mean you go and kill people and murder people and celebrate this stuff. I see where this country is going. And it's funny because, you know, on X, there are people who, there was one thread I saw recently where I can't remember what the issue was. It probably was the Carmelo Anthony story where someone said, why don't you go and claim there's a civil war happening or something? To which, of course, has not ever been my point that we are in a civil war, but that we are in a civil war period, civil strife, the fourth turning, whatever it may be. And sometimes civil strife just doesn't lead anywhere. Things calm down. Like civil rights movement in the 50s was considered civil strife. I'm hoping that's the case. The problem I'm having with everything is that it's all just getting worse. I'd like to believe it's better, and I don't want to blackpill anybody. People get mad. They say, Tim, stop blackpilling. And it's like, guys, I'm not telling you this to piss you off. I'm just saying, wow, look what happened. Now, I suppose the response from people is stop talking about it. That's a challenge, isn't it? A man showed up to UnitedHealth HQ with a gun threatening to kill people. And we know why he did that. Like, obviously he's crazy. So is Luigi Mangione, allegedly. We know they're crazy. Now, this guy they arrested there, so I'll still say allegedly based on what they've claimed about him. Many people say you can't compare the two. Mangione was of clear mind, knew what he was doing, allegedly. And this other guy was just nuts. No, you have to be crazy to a certain degree, whether great or small degrees, if you're going to commit these kinds of violence. So I suppose the challenge is we can sit back and plug our ears. Okay. You know what happens when you do that? You get revolution. The far left will continue their assault on the legal system. The judiciary will continue to shut down Donald Trump. The Democrats will win. You will only learn the news in passing, and you will believe the lies from the corporate press. Is that the world you want to live in? Then I can only tell you this. Tell me I'm wrong. I respect it. I don't know. What I can say is when the conversation first emerged about a pending or looming second civil war in this country, it was laughed off and ridiculed, despite the fact that, again, I did not come up with this. There are experts from the CIA, call them libs, crazy. Journalists, call them crazy. Former national security experts, call them all crazy. That's fine. But the narrative emerged, and since then, we have seen substantially worse rioting. We have seen January 6th. Whatever you think of it, it was substantial. We have seen, whatever you think of it, a 2020 election in which Donald Trump to this day maintains they stole it, they cheated, they rigged it. We saw in 2020 Texas v. Pennsylvania, where I believe around 48 states were involved in a lawsuit over the unconstitutional altering of state-level election procedures, which greatly benefited Democrats. Now, by all means, you can say Trump is wrong. They didn't rig an election. I can simply argue it is a fact that in numerous swing states run by Democrats, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia. Now, Georgia was run by Republicans, so I'll take that one off. The rules were changed outside the confines of the Constitution that states state legislatures decide the means and by which they hold elections. And judges and governors changed the rules, declaring an emergency. Unconstitutional. So you can argue that people wanted to vote for Trump or didn't. Doesn't matter. It is a fact. The rules were changed and it was unconstitutional. And those questions have never been answered, for which I warned. This issue will arise again. And the Supreme Court was too cowardly to actually listen to the arguments and even just say, no, you're allowed to do this. Except for Thomas and Alito, the only two who said, we must hear this case. Never answered. Since then, we have seen the victory of Donald Trump, which is promising. But we have now seen the Democrats arguing that Donald Trump is an authoritarian, a fascist. Now, I know they've always argued that. But what they're saying now is he must be stopped by any means necessary. There were two legitimate assassination attempts thwarted, one where Trump actually took a bullet. And at that moment, across the country, it was unanimous. We were 1 millimeter away from a civil war. Were we really, though? Because I don't even know if I believe that. I certainly believe that if Donald Trump lost his life, we would be spiraling rapidly towards an escalation of violence. But Trump, by the grace of God, tilted his head and took a bullet to the ear instead. And left to this day argues he lied. He faked it. He hit himself with glass. Glass hit him. Or he bumped his head. None of it's true. In the photos that were released of Trump from the New York Times, where you can actually see the bullet, Trump is holding his ear immediately and pulls his hand out and there's blood. He was struck by a bullet. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm crazy. All I'll tell you is all of these things are grains of sand that eventually make a heap. Look at this give, send, go for Luigi Mangione. $900,000. $900,000. And I've got another give, send, go for you that certainly will incite outrage. This is the $432,000 raised for Carmelo Anthony, the man who has been charged with, a 17-year-old charged with first-degree murder in the stabbing of Austin Metcalf. I'm not here to litigate this case, but to point out the right and the left have made their determinations for the most part. The left is pouring money into this guy to an absurd degree. The right is donating to a lesser extent, but they are, to the family of Austin Metcalf. The right says outright this guy committed murder and he's being rewarded for it. And the left is arguing that he was totally in self-defense and he will be exonerated. Again, I'm not here to litigate this. I'm here to point out the division between the two sides on this one is stark, and there's only one thing that matters. Now, I understand that one's hot, but in this case, what's likely going to happen? When Carmelo Anthony stands trial, I fully expect BLM to riot, issuing veiled external threats, as it were, but threats nonetheless to the jury, just like with Derek Chauvin. The function of a judiciary and a court system in this country, I believe, largely does not matter at this point. Derek Chauvin arrived on scene in the George Floyd incident after he was already placed on the ground and subdued. Chauvin was not party to anything that had happened, only knew, here is a very large man that has been subdued. I'm going to implement standard Minnesota police practices, and did. Chauvin died. I'm sorry, Floyd died. Chauvin nearly died when he was stabbed multiple times in jail. Derek Chauvin did nothing wrong. And I will say it again. It is an unfortunate tragedy, but as the details of the case have emerged and we've gone through the facts, initially we all just saw the immediate video and said, why wouldn't he render aid? But then we learned from the facts of the case and from the video evidence that emerged, Chauvin arrived after the fact. He used a lesser degree of force than he was permitted, as per the defense's own arguments in cross-examination. But he was charged at state level, despite the fact the judge agreed there's no fair trial for this man. He was then charged at the federal level. They put all of those cops in prison, even the officer who did nothing but hold back a crowd with his back to Chauvin and Floyd, not even knowing what was going on. You have Ahmaud Arbery, a man who was a suspected burglar, felonies. And the guy who simply filmed what had happened got life in prison. I do not see this country behaving rationally, and I do not see outcomes based on rational logic. So in this next case, and in this Mangione case, do you believe, my friends, that when Mangione stands trial, the jurors will be safe? Do you think those jurors, knowing what will happen to them if they convict Mangione, do you think they'll convict? I wouldn't be surprised if we get a mistrial. I wouldn't be surprised if the jurors sit at the table and they whisper to each other, there's no way to win this. And then they mutter, let's just mistrial this. Then they go out and say it's split 50-50. Nobody knows. Get a different jury. I do not see a reality where Mangione, the jurors, are anything but walking through a riot when they enter that court. As Taylor Lorenz mentioned on her in her CNN interview, her audience growth has never been bigger than when she defended a man accused of murdering a CEO in cold blood. But shall we continue? From the Post-Millennial. Washington State professor arrested after allegedly assaulting student with MAGA hat. Sorry, MAGA hat. Everybody yells at me for saying MAGA. MAGA. Why? Why are people like this? Tesla vehicles are being vandalized, firebombed, shot at. People are selling their Teslas. Sales of Teslas are going down because the left is trying to destroy the company and short the stock. Well, they're selling the cars because people are scared of the terrorism. Some people probably don't like Elon, so they're selling their vehicles, sure. And the media is reporting it. People are selling their Teslas because they don't want to be seen driving this vehicle because they don't like Elon. I think largely it's because they don't want to be murdered, because there are waves of terrorism happening across this country. In the meantime, though, it escalates at the federal level. El Salvador's Bukele says, preposterous to suggest he will return Abrego Garcia to the U.S. You already know the story, but I do have the details. This is a hot culture war issue in which Trump is in his legal authority to do what he did. And there was only a minor administrative error, at least it's been reported. Now, the Trump administration is actually arguing there was no error. In fact, they did everything properly. A man had a removal order. 2 courts found him to be a member of MS-13. He did enter this country illegally. So he was taken. He was sent back to his home country. In his home country, he's accused of crimes. That is, it's a crime to be a member of MS-13. El Salvador has imprisoned him for this. He's not a citizen of this country. He's not from Maryland. He had a temporary stay of deportation, not an asylum grant. But how is the media framing it? El Salvador won't return wrongly deported Maryland man. Maryland? This guy is not from Maryland. Why are they framing it this way? I don't know. We call them evil. We call them liars. They know they're liars. But look at the results. r/Maryland, the Reddit page for people who live in Maryland, posted this 4 days ago. Are you angry about the Maryland father deported in error? The Maryland father. He's an illegal immigrant from El Salvador that 2 courts have determined he is a member of MS-13. The responses, error my ass. Trump doesn't give AF. I feel horrible for what the guy is probably going through down there in the notorious prison. Really? Is the person who the Supreme Court recently ruled the admin needs to try to get them back? If they can send him to El Salvador prison without due process, they can send you to an El Salvadoran prison without due process. They can't. And the man had due process. A court heard the case. 2 courts determined he was an MS-13 gang member. The courts determined that he was illegally in the country, and there was an order of deportation issued. That, my friends, is called due process. Now, over fear of death, if he returned to El Salvador, he was given a stay. But what was that fear of death? Likely the crackdown of the government on cartel members. Yeah. It's not our business. Now, one can argue you can't return him or deport him or whatever it may be, but this is not an issue of due process. The only administrative error here may be that there was a stay and they didn't have it. That is, here's what I think happens. Now, they're going to give you the most extreme version of this. What I think happens is Trump gets in. He says, give me a list of deportation orders. They get a list of all the deportation orders. They go and arrest everybody with a deportation order and send them off. They say, the information pertaining to the stay on deportation wasn't in the file that contained the deportation order, which is an administrative error. They then said, get him back. The Supreme Court said you can't order the president to engage in foreign policy. That is, right now, there's an El Salvadoran man in El Salvador who is in prison as per their laws. So what's the problem? They're lying. and they're fomenting fear, hatred, and violence. So don't expect, or I should say, don't be surprised. You should expect the left to get crazy over these deportations. Take a look at this from r/news. Not even Maryland, just straight up the news page with 50,000 upvotes. This is the default news section of Reddit. Top comment. Why aren't all Americans rioting in the streets over this? An innocent man was kidnapped off of the street and is probably dead now, all on U.S. government orders. The replies. One person said, not innocent, not a citizen, not kidnapped. He's a Salvadoran citizen who was present in the USA illegally and has been deported back to his home country in El Salvador. He's home now. -23, meaning most people are saying no one should see this. For those that don't know Reddit, because it's not as prominent as it used to be, upvote does not mean right, and downvote does not mean wrong. Upvote means this is worthy of being seen. Downvote means no one should see it. It is not an agree button, as Reddit states. That's basically what it is, though. So when these people are clicking down, what ends up happening, as you saw when I opened it, it's closed. When you open up the comments, it's collapsed, and you can't actually see what was said because people have said no one should see it, which is insane. One person says because it will do nothing. The next comment is, America really is an ishhole now. You Americans need to get out into the streets and not leave until that man is returned and Trump is out of office. Now let's look at the top comments. Those are controversial. There are really only a few logical conclusions to draw. Trump told him to say this to subvert the decision of the courts. He is dead. They don't actually know where he is since record keeping is suspect at best. Suspect at best. So kidnapping it is then? This is an effing problem. So let me get this straight. These people committed no crimes. They were illegally detained and removed from the country against their will. And they're being held in a foreign prison indefinitely with no due process. And yet they still frame it as a deportation and not kidnapping and human trafficking. Yes, people are being kidnapped based on their ethnicity and sold to do unpaid labor under horrific conditions, potentially until they die. I believe there's a word for this practice, and it is historical precedence in this country. Aviary, savory, something like that. Let's try this again. MS-13 is a notorious criminal gang deemed terrorists by the federal government, by the executive branch, which is their authority to do. These individuals illegally entered the country, for which they are subject to deportation. The man in question is a citizen of El Salvador, was sent to his home country, not a foreign prison. As for these other individuals, there are questions about the general deportations, but the Supreme Court ruled Trump can't do this. The individuals that are being deported, Supreme Court agreed. But it doesn't really matter. What matters is there's money to be made. And if you want to engage in politics, you're either with Trump or you're against Trump. The funny thing is, the people that are with Trump often criticize him. Not all of them, but a lot of them. On the left, they're just all opposed to Trump no matter what. Now, look, there are Democrats that argue with each other, but they are unified against Donald Trump. Take a look at this from Senator Chris Van Hollen. I've been clear. If President Bukele doesn't want to meet here in D.C., then I intend to go to El Salvador this week to check on Kilmar Abrego Garcia's condition and discuss his release. Kilmar was illegally abducted and deported by the Trump admin. He must be brought home now. Indeed, that is false. All that has been argued is an administrative error. Nothing was illegal about what they did. The deportation was an error, and that is agreed by everybody. But they say illegally because what does that mean? It means they are asserting legal, I should say, legislative and judicial superiority. They are saying what Donald Trump did violated our laws, so we have authority over him in this regard. He broke the law. Trump did not break the law. Law was enforced, and there was an error. Let me tell you guys about malicious prosecution. One may wonder, if you are wrongly charged with murder and they put you on trial for 2 years and destroy your life, can you sue the government? Nope. Because if they were acting in good faith, genuinely believing you're the murderer, and then only at the last minute were you found to be innocent, that's not malicious. That's just you winning. However, if it is found that evidence was withheld and they wanted you to be prosecuted because they hate you or for political reasons, and you can prove that, then you have a malicious prosecution. That is illegal. Donald Trump's executive branch acted in good faith to uphold a deportation order on an individual. It was not illegal. It was in error. Chris Murphy. Once again, here come the lies. This is a Democrat from Connecticut. Bone chilling. A court ordered Kilmar Abrego Garcia to stay in the United States. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that he was illegally removed. No, they didn't. Trump is pretending he won the 9-0 ruling. The 9-0 ruling was broad. It covered various bases, notably that no district court can order Trump to engage in foreign policy, that the Trump administration must facilitate the return of Garcia should he choose to or want to return. That's about it. Trump cannot be required to engage in foreign policy by the courts. He says, you may not think this case means anything to you, but let me tell you why it does. He says, Abrego Garcia came here over 10 years ago, illegally, by the way, married a U.S. citizen and has 3 U.S. citizen children. But he put in removal proceedings because he didn't apply for asylum in time and because of alleged ties to drug gangs. He denies any gang affiliation. A district court and an appellate court both ruled he was a member of MS-13. That is due process, by the way. You can think whatever you want about the merits of him staying or being deported. There's really only one key fact. A court ruled he cannot be deported to El Salvador because he would face threat of death there. In the U.S., the executive is required to follow a court ruling. Trump did not. He put Abrego Garcia on a plane to El Salvador, and worse, despite no allegation of criminal behavior, he was put in a heinous El Salvador prison. Because being a member of MS-13, as 2 courts ruled, is illegal in El Salvador, and they arrest gang members. In the United States, gang affiliation is also criminal. In certain jurisdictions, to clarify. Trump's violation of the law was so brazen, the Supreme Court stepped in. In a rare 9-0 ruling, they said Trump had to bring Abrego Garcia back. But in the video above, you see Trump's advisor, Miller, lying through his teeth and saying Trump won the ruling 9-0 because it's an interpretation on a broad ruling. I digress. I think y'all largely get the point. Will Chamberlain breaks down the real story, as he is a lawyer. The Maryland father, Red, likely a member of MS-13, who was removed to El Salvador, and who the Atlantic apparently and the entire political left are demanding be returned. The point with this is simply the divide. The left is so anti-right, they will defend illegal immigrants, criminal gang members. It's a degree of insanity that I genuinely think just shows that there's no rectifying this divide. And Bernie Sanders is stepping in. You may doubt Bernie, you may mock Bernie, but my friends, this one does matter. Now, before we go, usually at the halfway mark, we do another quick shout out to smash the like button, share the show. Thank you guys to the Crowder team and the Mug Club fans and all of Dan Bongino's fans who watch my show. It does mean a lot to me. And with tremendous and great respect to Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, I am a tremendous fan of Dan and all the work that he's done and is doing. It really is, I mean this sincerely, it is an inspiration, the work that he is doing. Because he gave up so much to work for this, for work to serve the public. I respect that. So smash the like button, share the show, follow me on X and Instagram. Sanders says world just witnessed a new step forward in Trump's move towards authoritarianism. Senator Bernie Sanders said that a Maryland resident, no, he's not. He's an illegal immigrant with, I believe, 2 deportation orders. And the only error was that he had a temporary stay on the deportations. Insane. Now, Bernie Sanders is coming out, taking this position. Bernie Sanders and AOC have been leading large rallies with tens of thousands of people in the stands of stadiums. Many people are saying it may be AOC Sanders in 2028. Probably not. Bernie's old. But AOC maybe. And many of us have made this argument. AOC is priming herself for a I don't want to say presidential, but a national position. Currently, she is beating Chuck Schumer in the polls for the New York Senate seat. Now, to be completely honest, I'm not sure if a woman could win the presidency. I know feminists out there will scream, spit and yell, and they'll be very angry, but I genuinely mean it. I think if the Democrats ran basically anybody else in 2016, Trump would not have won. But it had to be Hillary, and people hated Hillary. And there were a lot of people that don't vote women. And that's just it. That's true. So Trump squeaked by. I want you to understand why the Abrego Garcia story is so important. From the Post Millennial. Illegal immigrant found guilty of murdering Maryland mother of 5, Rachel Morin. Rachel was a beautiful mother of 5 from Maryland, and her life was taken at the hands of a monster who should have never been here in the first place, Trump wrote. According to Fox 45, the jury found Martinez Hernandez guilty of first-degree rape, murder, sexual assault, and kidnapping. Morin was reported missing on August 6, 2023, after she went for a run on the MA and PA Trail in Bel Air, Maryland, and did not return. That's crazy, man. This is a Maryland woman who is dead because of an illegal immigrant murderer rapist. That's crazy. And when Trump says we are deporting these people, the Democrats defend the evil. I'd like to stress, my friends, 100% of illegal immigrants are criminals and subject to deportation. 100%. The left tries to play this argument where they conflate illegal immigrant with immigrant because they themselves defend evil every single day. And now we have the judicial coup. Trump can't revoke legal status of migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Judge rules. How? Honest question, how? This protection was issued by Joe Biden. Donald Trump certainly can revoke it. What can you do? 677 district courts, and all it takes is one to issue a universal injunction. U.S. District Court Judge Indira Tolwani blocked the Trump administration from moving forward with its plan to terminate the legal status of those migrants on April 24th. The admin had warned those affected by its announcement that they would need to self-deport by that date or face arrest and deportation by federal immigration agents. Tolwani suspended the deportation warnings the government had sent and prohibited officials from revoking the legal protection known as an immigration parole. Interesting. Was this a class action lawsuit on behalf of all of these individuals? It might have been, but I don't think so. The early termination without any case-by-case justification of the legal status for non-citizens who have complied with DHS programs and entered the country lawfully undermines the rule of law. Monday's ruling, a significant reprieve for those who arrived under a Biden policy administration, promoted legal immigration and dissuaded migrants from crossing the southern border unlawfully. Under the program known as CHNV, a total of 532,000 migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela were allowed to fly to the U.S. after securing a sponsorship from U.S.-based individuals. Upon entry, they were granted immigration parole and allowed to work in the U.S. lawfully for 2 years. The Biden admin officials partially credited the policy for a sharp reduction in illegal border crossings by migrants. You see what they were doing? In order to make the numbers seem less, they let these people come in illegally. The Biden admin paused the initiative for several weeks in 2020. So tell me this. 2 things. How are the courts able to issue so many universal injunctions, effectively decreeing by law these people can stay, and that Donald Trump doesn't have the authority to rescind their temporary status? How is it that Joe Biden can grant temporary status universally and no judge stops him? But Donald Trump can't take that same status away under the same authorities. You see the game being played. As Aaron McIntyre said, the side that wants to win will always defeat the side that wants to be left alone. And this is the threat Democrats fear of Donald Trump. Trump wants to win. He's not going to sit back and just accept this. That's the state we are in. But here's where it gets worse. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I hate to send negative vibes your way, my friends. So let me just say this. Be strong. Bad news does not mean the end of the world. If you are someone who sees a worrying story or trend and feels fear and anxiety, you need reassess your situation and be strong. I've experienced not nearly as much as many people of this world in terms of hardship. Not nearly. And some people may say I shouldn't have to, but I tell you this. Center yourself. Understanding what is going on in this world will make you stronger and better prepared. You should not be panicked. You should not be living in fear. You should be working every day, making money, protecting your family, and just hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. From Times Now News, there's not many reports on this, but we have this tweet from @Amuse. They say Fort McCoy's Colonel Shea Baez Ramirez refuses to display SecDef and POTUS photographs. When will she be relieved from command? Now, this story is not entirely confirmed, so we don't know for sure. Some have argued these photos that are flipped backwards are old portraits from the previous administration, and they've not received new ones. That may be the case. But it's not the only story. This ain't about merit. High-ranking female military official stood her ground against Trump's ego when she refused to hang his pictures and got fired for it, Jasmine Crockett claims. I worry about this. If you are in the armed forces, it is not your job to be political. You are to say, yes, sir. If the order is lawful and they're just telling you to put up a picture of a guy, that's certainly lawful, and you refuse to do it. I ask all of you that are watching right now to comment and let me know what you think, because we will grab your comments in a few minutes. Is there a risk that these officers defy lawful orders in the future when it really matters? Considering we have numerous reports that there are certain woke members of the military acting in defiance of the chain of command on petty issues, do you believe that presents a risk that should Donald Trump give a lawful order that they might defy it? I am not trying to insinuate anything. One could argue, look, if Trump issued an order to arrest people, they do it. This is just a photograph. One may also argue they clearly have disdain for the president and would obstruct Trump any way they could. In my opinion, Trump should remove these individuals immediately, because we are looking at one branch of government, the judicial, effectively in conflict with the executive over who has the true authority. We have members of the armed forces now reportedly acting in insubordination and refusing to honor their duly elected commander-in-chief and duly confirmed and appointed and confirmed Secretary of Defense. That shows a terrifying break in the chain of command. My fear is that Donald Trump maybe declares the Insurrection Act during a Summer of Love riot, or issues a lawful order in general to secure the border. And these individuals instruct those beneath them to ignore or defy those orders. Chaos. Now, I largely think people down the chain of command might just say, no way. The president said it. I ain't going to listen to you. But it's not always like that. The president may issue an order that makes its way down the chain of command. An officer may tell those lower in the chain of command, we're pulling out from the river. We've been reassigned. And the troops just say, you got it. There was a story in Turkey where they say a coup was waged against Erdogan. This is some 10 years ago. And the conspiracy theory was that Erdogan had loyalists order young men to take the Bosphorus Bridge to protect it from a terror attack. These young men heard a lawful order. We're going to be stationed on the bridge. We want to secure it. And they went, okay, that sounds normal, right? And so they did. The moment they took the bridge, the media reported that, in fact, they were acting autonomously to stage a coup against the president of the country. Citizens then rushed to the bridge, assaulted these soldiers, beat the crap out of them, dragged them through the streets. These young men had no idea what was going on. At least that's the belief. The reason I tell this story is not because we know what happened in Turkey, but when you have a potential break in the chain of command like this, I'm not saying it means they will defy lawful orders that really matter, but it could be as simple as Trump says, we need troops on the southern border right now. There's a threat from the cartels over the deportations. And then this woman goes, you got it. Goes to the people under her command and she says, we'll be staying here, everybody. And then everyone just stays. They have no idea what's going on. They don't know what the orders are. They're just, okay. Or worse, what happens if one of these individuals says, all right, pack up. We're being sent to this bridge to secure it. And these young men say, okay. It's not an unlawful order. It's not unreasonable. They were just told to stand guard at a bridge. And then Trump says, you are acting in defiance because Trump ordered something different. The fact is, this is why it's a threat. I should say the examples I gave, this is why it's a threat when you have a break in the chain of command like this. If these people are showing disdain for their commander-in-chief to this degree, refusing to show his picture on something so petty, I don't think we should take any risks at all. in the event Trump has to issue a serious command, like we are going to defend Taiwan or something like that, even if I don't agree with it. If it comes to a point where not only do we have a break between the branches of government asserting authority over each other, we end up with the military refusing to follow orders. I'll just put it this way. Civil war is typically defined as two or more factions fighting for control of one government. That's how you describe it. In this regard, what do we have? Street violence, threats of terror, one side on mass media championing acts of terror, cheering for a mass murderer, celebrating him. At the higher levels, you have lawfare against Trump's lawyers, conservatives. They're being swatted, they're being targeted, they're being falsely accused. Trump then wins, changes the administration, but you still have now the judicial branch defying everything the president does despite having no authority to do so. Trump is then put between a rock and a hard place. He must escalate and tell the courts, I will not abide by this. You have no legal authority here, which they've started doing. Multiple factions fighting for control of one government. Now, it's not hot conflict necessarily. It's just street terror and insurgency. I hope we don't go anywhere farther than this. From Politico, the date here is July 4th. Leader of the pro-Trump Project 2025 suggests there will be a new American revolution. He says the revolution will be bloodless if the left allows it to be. Sure. 5 months ago, Ask Politics, is the U.S. heading for another civil war? From r/discussion 5 months ago, the second U.S. Civil War is already here. 22 hours ago, some good news. Change my view on Reddit. The culture war is functionally over and the conservatives have won. I don't know that that's true, but certainly a view. What I can just say, my friends, is I do have deep concerns that we are entering a period of tumult that is continuing to escalate. And I just wish for the best. But I'm glad that I moved to the middle of nowhere. I'm glad that I moved out to the sticks and built a big security fence and got armed guards and have guns. It may not be something that's typical of the average person, but with the swattings, the death threats, and the threats that we receive periodically, the firebombing of the governor's mansion, the celebrating of Luigi Mangione, the targeting of people who own Teslas, I own 3. I'm glad to be away from these people. If I stayed in New Jersey, I fear the worst. There's a residential area that is mixed and largely Democrat. I wonder, my friends. It's terrifying stuff. I hope for the best. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm crazy. Tell me I'm wrong. But I hear it over and over again. Say, Tim, I thought you said that we were heading towards a civil war. The only thing that you need to understand is that people adapt to their circumstances. And so if you went, my God, my friends, if you went 10 years ago, before Trump descends the escalator and said to anybody in politics, 10 years from now, Donald Trump will be on a second term. It's a non-consecutive term. He'll have appointed Elon Musk to serve in his administration as a special government employee who starts going around to federal agencies and firing every single person. And his team will be led by a man who goes by the name Big Balls. They'd say, dude, shut up. Elon Musk's a liberal. Trump running for president and winning? Non-consecutive terms? Only Grover Cleveland's the only one who done that. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Add everything else. Oh, no, it gets crazier than that, my friends. Not only that, but after his first term, when he loses during the great pandemic that we haven't seen in 100 years, and millions of people are allegedly dying, and new technology and vaccines that that send RNA to your cells, that there's going to be 1,000+ people who storm into the Capitol during the electoral vote count, disrupting the proceedings, smashing things up. Then there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people milling about, several hundred more who enter on the other side and march through the building. They're going to call it an insurrection. There will be lawsuits across the whole country arguing that Trump can't run because he violated the 14th Amendment and waged insurrection against his country. Then they're going to accuse Trump of committing a bunch of crimes, try and put him in prison. They're going to go after his lawyers in numerous states. I'm telling you, man, they're going to arrest his lawyer in Georgia. They're going to arrest his lawyer in Wisconsin. They're going to try and seize the buildings that he owns in New York. Could you imagine if I said all of that? If you took that clip of me and sent it back 10 years, they'd be like, okay, buddy, maybe we can get you some medicine that will calm you down. I cannot believe the extreme degree to which this country has traversed in 10 years. I can't believe it. So I hope I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. Call me crazy. That would be the best outcome for this country. I hope Cash Dan and Pam Bondi the best. I hope they secure things and bring about law enforcement. And I hope we're on the back end of the bell curve. I hope this is the end in the spike of violence and things are now winding down. I hope that this is, with Trump winning, conservatives have won the culture war and the left will, while violent, slowly fizzle out. And then what we had was a period of civil strife that went nowhere. It's possible. I hope that's the case. Smash the like button, my friends. We'll grab some of your Rumble rants here before we send you on your way to hang out with Russell Brand, who will be going live, I believe, in just about 5 minutes. So we'll queue up that raid, of course. In fact, he is getting ready to go live already. In the meantime, let's grab some of your Rumble rants. Jeffrey French says, Tim, civilization doesn't allow public executive regardless of reason, period. Regardless of reason, period, brother. What do you mean? Public executive? I don't know what you mean by that. Miles says, can I get a shout out for the Rhythm Roast Cafe podcast? My co-host Danny D was deeply involved in the Chicago music scene for years, running security for JAM Productions. We argue culture and politics. Oh, yeah. Who's Jam? Who does Jam Productions? I think, is that Metro? Do they do, or what do they do? I don't know. Yeah, what venues do they have? Riviera? Oh, okay. Park West, the Vic. They do the Metro, don't they? Do the Metro? I think I knew that because I'm pretty sure that's who I worked for. Because I worked for the Metro in Chicago. I did security. And I'll say this. I don't know why they hired me. I was like 21. And I was probably, like 150 pounds. I'm 5'10"-ish. I guess it's fine, But like, what do you want me to do? And I just stood around and pointed a flashlight at people. And I worked there for a few months. It was fun. Shout out. Seb Apkey Jack says, Tim, how much does Netanyahu pay for propaganda? Nothing, which is the worst thing. They think that, they invite me to a meeting and then they're just hoping I'll say, what they want. I don't pay anything. I will say all of these people, I'm sure a lot of them aren't even real people. I mean it. I think they're sock puppets because you got to be real dumb. But there's a lot of dumb people out there. Don't get me wrong. I love it's like Tim works for Russia, which is a lie. And I went to a meeting with Netanyahu. And so it means I work for Israel, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I'll say this too. Half the room in the Netanyahu meeting were in opposition to what he was saying. And one of the funniest moments was when they were talking about the Israelis. We're talking about the threat of Iran and how once they defeat Israel, they're coming for the U.S. And then someone, I'm pretty sure I knew who said this, but I'm not. It's up to them to say this. But they're just like, no, they're not. Just blurted it right out to their faces. No, they're not. And then they were like, look, if they get a nuke, it's like, no, they won't. That's not going to happen. That was funny. But Jeffrey French says U.S. Constitution doesn't apply illegals. Full stop, Tim. Incorrect. It applies to a limited degree. It does. A limited degree. Mitchell says, look up Stephen Miller's statement to the press. The Alien Enemies Act and MS-13 designation of terrorist groups overrides the withholding order. Indeed. So yes, to clarify, when I was mentioning that the administration said it wasn't even an error, Stephen Miller made this point and Pam Bondi reiterated, Pam Bondi said this and Miller reiterated. The Alien Enemies Act basically removed that order. We're talking about enemies of this country, criminal cartels. Indeed. What do we got here? Dr. Dickhead, what a name, says, deport them all. What is it? With the illegals, we're free to deport them all. Indeed. Dragon Lady Chris says, it's not about ego. It's normal and, for lack of a better word, usual to post pictures of the current commander-in-chief. I know. Ego. Every building's got a picture of the president in it. They say, here's our president. That's nuts. Not literally every building, government buildings. Amp says, in the military, even the appearance of impropriety is grounds for an officer to be dismissed, to not degrade order and morale of the troops and commands. And I think they should. Super Gamer says, you think we could start charging these people with aiding and abetting or something like that since they're helping criminals? In certain circumstances, completely. Indeed. Indeed. Cold civil war. One user says, I would never want to live that way. I pray for the IRL family. Yeah, you know, the last thing I'll say is it is pretty nuts. Certainly my wife doesn't want to live this way, and it kind of sucks. It's one of the few things that actually would have me consider retiring. And that is the escalation of violence in this country and the threats that we receive to do this job are worrisome. And it's a question of what matters most. And it is a deep challenge. I have a new baby. She's the best. And as everybody knows when they have kids, what matters most to me is obviously my family. But I fear what country is left behind for my child, and we're planning on having more kids, in the event that the trees that were planted of this nation, whose shade we sit beneath, are chopped down. These trees are withering. We sit beneath them, and there is limited shade these days, and there are people fighting over what's left. I could certainly say, you know what? Let's run and just cover our heads. But what does that mean? It means in 10, 20 years, what will my child have to inherit in this nation? No, strong men fight to preserve and protect this world so that those who come later will have great trees they can sit beneath. But that means when the evil arises seeking to destroy and chop down those beautiful trees, we say no. My friends, it is time to hang out with our friend Russell Brand. So we'll send you on your way over to hang out with him right now at this Rumble raid. Join up there, and you can follow me on this channel. Follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Subscribe to this channel if you did not. Culture War Live coming up May 3rd in person with you as members of our Discord joining us on the debate stage. Think Kill Tony meets Jubilee. Political debates, but with you guys in the audience and a tinge of comedy. Alex Stein will be there, and he will roast you, and it will be fun. But these debates will be entertaining. The audience will be involved with their booing and cheering. So I'm really excited for this. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Stay tuned. More segments coming up throughout the day, and we will see you all then.